Good morning, everybody. We're just letting a few more people in, and then we will start our question and answers with the appraiser. All right. So I hope everyone is doing well this morning. I am Cheryl Ewert with Community Lending, and I have Amanda Conder as well with me from Community Lending. We are both here to ask the appraiser. So we did go to social media and found some of the questions that you wanted to ask, and we wanted to make sure that this is the time that you can take advantage and actually ask the appraiser, because normally you're not allowed to speak to them when they come to your home and have any type of influence, but this is going to answer all your questions in regards to what's going on in the market, what's going on with the changes regarding the appraisals, and what's the difference between different appraisals. So this is your time to ask. We do have some questions that are set. We're going to go ahead and ask those, and then we will open it up. So you can always use the chat box to ask your questions, and Amanda will be monitoring that shortly. But I wanted to introduce, we have Richard Gary with USA Appraisals and Scott Mills with USA Appraisals, who are here joining us for coffee, and they're going to let us know everything. And I just am so thankful that you guys are here joining us this morning. So thank you so much. Welcome. And let me see. Okay, there you go, Richard. You're unmuted.
Okay. So you can hear me okay?
We can hear you perfect. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. And I apologize, I'm working remote right now, so my connections may be a little off here and there, but I think we should be okay.
Perfect. So we do have a lot of realtors on the call this morning, along with some homeowners, because they are too, whether they're renovating and looking to sell, looking to buy. So they were going to have some questions as well, but let's go ahead and we're going to start with some of, first, go ahead and introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of background about you, and that way they, have a better understanding of who they're listening to and what to expect from you.
Okay. As she said, my name is Rick Gary. I am the Chief Valuation Officer for United States Appraisals. Been in the industry about 27 years now. I cut my teeth in rural Missouri, went to Las Vegas, appraised for a short time, and spent 9 years in Florida, Central Florida, managing for a large national appraisal company there, Central Florida region from Tampa through Orlando up into Daytona and over to Cocoa. So I'm, familiar with Florida, and then I've been with United States Appraisals for 7 years now. So I've seen everything from, rural Missouri, working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, to some of the major, metro areas, and then on to the AMC realm. So I've got a pretty diverse background.
Awesome. And Scott, how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Scott Mills. So I'm a client relations manager over here at USA, working with you guys at Community Lending. I've been working for USA for almost 3 years, and AMC's in general for 5 years. So a pretty good understanding of how things work from kind of an operational standpoint. Less with the appraisals, that's more Rick's thing, but a lot more information like operational wise that I can offer as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I know, I'm sure you guys are over on the West Coast, so I'm sure it's super hectic over there, just as it is here. But because you have such experience over, with Florida, that's awesome, because that's a lot of the questions that people have is regarding Florida market. But I guess, the market in general. So we have some questions that we received through social media, through a lot of people, and we want to go ahead and ask them. So we're going to kind of go to the basics of what is the difference between obviously the interior exterior appraisal versus a desktop, because I know some changes took place and now they're doing desktop appraisals, and a lot of agents and a lot of homeowners, they don't understand what that means. Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, so the exterior appraisal, the appraiser will actually get in a car, drive out to the neighborhood, go by the house. The difference with the desktop is that they're gathering all the information from their desk. They're using public resources like county records, MLS to gather the data. And one of the big changes with COVID-19 and some of the appraisal flexibilities is that they changed some of the certifications. Prior to this, if you did a desktop or you did a drive-by appraisal, you would gather your information from these other sources. Now they're allowing appraisers to actually contact the homeowner to be able to gather information from people who have an interest in the transaction, where prior it was prohibited. You couldn't gather your information through that way. You know, kind of as a risk thing for Fannie and Freddie, they didn't want appraisers gathering this information through those sources because people with a interest in the transaction can, you know, how's a nice way to put this, inflate what they actually have. So, and there's a lot of different ways that they're, you know, we're doing that now. We just released our app for appraisers and homeowners so that they can gather photos, gather data through the app, and it gets presented to the appraiser. So that helps the appraiser understand the upgrades that are in a home, the condition, you know, any issues that they can see through video or photos, you know, things like that. But the biggest difference is for a desktop, the appraiser doesn't really leave their office. They stay there and they gather all this information and put it together versus the other types of inspections where, at least with an exterior, they've driven through the neighborhood, they've seen the home, you know, from the outside and can start making some, you know, at least some assumptions based on what they're observing from the outside.
Oh, okay. So they can actually upload photos of their home to that app. And that, because that was another question we had, was how do they know if someone just had renovations done, how do they know if, you know, if they were upgraded? So is there any way to determine if that is in fact the right home? Because I mean, if someone comes in and takes pictures of the interior, is that just in good faith that they're thinking that they're taking pictures of their home instead of somebody else's home to get value?
And that's why we've developed the app rather than just doing it through email, because through the app we can geocode that they're at this specific location while they're taking the photos. So each photo is geocoded and tagged, so we know the location and can verify that that's where they were when they took the photos, and that they were taken in real time and not providing photos from, you know, a year ago.
Very smart, because that was my question. You know, some people can be sneaky.
Yep.
Okay, so the next question is there, now I have seen that some appraisers are still going to the interior. Obviously, they're just doing different things as far as what precautions they're taking due to COVID. So is there anything specific if DU requires an interior? Is that what they're doing? Is they're using the app to document the interior, or is the appraiser still going in?
Yeah, the appraiser still has to go into the home. I'm sure you've all heard of USPAP for appraisers, you know, our guidelines. So they have come out and they've said that you know, taking photographic evidence and those things aren't a substitute for an interior inspection. So if it's an interior inspection is required, it's business as usual. The appraiser's going to the home, collecting the data themselves, taking their own photos, and everything.
Okay, and are they required to wear any specific gear? Obviously masks when they walk in the home, but I have heard some appraisers are wearing like the shoe covers, and there's one for outside, one for inside. Is that something that you guys, that your appraisers are doing, or is it just pretty standard face mask, gloves, and things like that?
We're requesting that they take all the necessary precautions as indicated by, you know, the World Health Organization, you know, but we're not requiring them to do any of that because, you know, some places you just can't find the necessary necessary items to be able to, meet those requirements. So what we're asking is for them to reach out to the borrower, have a discussion. This is what I'm going to be doing. Are both parties comfortable with that? And vice versa, we're asking our appraisers to call, ask, is there anybody sick in the house, anybody showing symptoms, things like that, because we want to be, the road goes both ways. We want to make sure both parties are protected.
Right. And actually, one of the agents that I work closely with, she actually brought something to my attention that some homeowners, and I would assume appraisers, may be required to sign a form as far as if you do experience symptoms in the next 2 weeks, that you are to notify that party. Are you guys required to sign that?
No.
Okay.
We've heard some rumblings in California that something like that is happening, but that's not any kind of state requirement, national requirement. It's some local jurisdictions are trying to get that implemented, but there's no blanket requirement for that as of right now.
Okay. All right. Good information. Now, obviously, the next question was, when we asked everybody, if you could ask the appraiser one thing, what would you ask? And the funny question was, what's the value of my home? And it's like, obviously, that is the general question, but that's not what we're asking today. So, but we do have a lot of questions surrounding evaluations and value and determining the value. So we're gonna ask some of those real quick. So
okay.
We answered the question regarding if they've never entered the home, how are they determining value, which you used all those different resources that you mentioned. Now, they want to know the difference between how much, I guess a general, because there's no set number, but a general idea of if you have carpet versus laminate wood floor versus tile, is there a difference in range of what value you could get out of those? Because I know some people may have carpet in the bedrooms and wood floors in the common areas, or tile and then carpet. What does that do for you? Because we hear carpet's not really a good thing anymore.
That is an interesting question that I would love to be able to answer specifically, but I'm going to answer it kind of vaguely here. So upgrades and carpet versus tile versus wood being some of those upgrades, is a lot of it is market expectation. So if you're going into a specific neighborhood where a buyer goes in that neighborhood and most of the houses have wood floors, tile, things like that, but this house has carpet, then the buyers are expecting wood floors, tile, and not carpet. So you're going to get a higher return by changing it from carpet to what is typical for the market. Vice versa, if you're in a neighborhood where everything's carpet and you decide to upgrade to hardwood and tile, you're not going to see near as big a return because buyer expectations are, hey, I'm going to get carpet in this neighborhood for this price range. And that's what they're buying in that price range. So that goes for a lot of upgrades, upgrading your kitchen, things like that. The one thing I will say is that most of the time when you do upgrade something, rarely do you get a full return on that. And the reason being is that if you look at a house as like just different components and everything giving value to the house, let's say you're going to change the carpet. Well, the carpet in there has value at the current time. So when you take it out, you're taking that value away from the house. So then when you put wood back in, you're adding value for the wood, but you're adding it on top of the value you've already taken off. So, upgrades are one of those, unique features where you really have to have an understanding of your specific market and what buyers are expecting when they go into a house. Like a bathrooms, if your market has, all the homes have 2 bathrooms and your house has 4, well, 2 bathrooms meet most buyers' market expectations. So those extra 2 bathrooms may not add as much in value as they do to the neighborhood just, a mile over, where everything does have 4 bathrooms, and that's what buyers expect to have. And that's kind of, in general, how most, upgrades work, and it gets pretty specific down to the general, or to the micro and macro markets when you're discussing those things.
Okay. Amanda, you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, so jumping off of her question, I think that a lot of for sale by owners would like to have and like to know, maybe this might be a tool that they can utilize. What if you're in a neighborhood where your average home price, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, mica countertops, basic home fixtures, whatnot. Let's say you go in, you renovate your home, you've put granite countertops, all the good stuff in it. Would it be best for a borrower, or I'm sorry, not a borrower, but an actual homeowner to be able to provide and say, hey, Mr. Appraiser, I've upgraded this home and I know that, what the other houses look like in our area, but here's what I've done, and provided a list of actual improvements to the property so that the appraiser has that and can adjust his numbers accordingly? Is that something that's beneficial for sale by owner, or even any homeowner for that matter?
Yeah, that's always beneficial, is to know what upgrade and upkeep you've done on the home, and when, and the costs, because that gives us a general idea of the quality of material. Because when we're talking granite, you can see granite, but there are different degrees of say granite countertops. And when you know the cost, that helps you determine the quality of the granite that you've actually put into the home. And so, getting those things always helps the appraiser to understand where the home is in its life cycle also. Not to get too granular in detail, but, we use what we call effective age of the home, meaning how much economic life it has left, how long the improvements on the property are going to continue to add value to the overall property. And when you upgrade those things, you do your maintenance, you've done those things, that keeps that lower, which means that the house has more life left. And that's always helpful with value. That's why new construction is typically more than, a 5-year-old home, a 10-year-old home, because it has longer life left.
Okay, so one of the questions we had, and I'm going to skip down, Amanda, a little bit on our question list. They were asking about, putting in improvements to the home. A lot of people sometimes want to do a very cost-effective approach to it, and they may use maybe cheaper materials, but it looks amazing. So would that give a certain value versus if they went and spent, an X amount, like a more massive amount towards their renovations? How does that get determined as to, I guess, the true value of those improvements?
An appraiser should go into a house and look at it like a typical buyer. So, although having the cost is beneficial, will your typical buyer notice those differences? And that's, something that, if you're remodeling your house and you're looking at things, most buyers can tell the difference between a custom built kitchen and cabinets versus something you get from Lowe's or IKEA. And they'll pay differently accordingly. So, it goes back to your market and what, market expectations are. If you're really upgrading your house, making it look nice, and you're in a pretty average neighborhood, my thought process is that you go with the more cost-effective type of items, so that you're not overpaying for and over-improving for the neighborhood, versus, say, a custom-built neighborhood where, everything's been upgraded, it might be worth, spending the extra money to try and get that return on investment.
Okay. So is there specific things when upgrading and doing improvements that gives the biggest value? Like you mentioned, sometimes with the floors, switching from carpet to tile, sometimes it could be, I guess, considered a wash if, the value, they took value away and then they add a little bit, but it took away from that one. So we have a question as to what improvements give you the best impact in value? So is it bathrooms? Is it kitchen?
That one's, again, difficult to answer, but I would say, first and foremost is general maintenance on the home, because that goes to the overall condition. So you want to make sure that everything's upkept there. When you're talking about improvements, yes, the bathrooms and the kitchens are probably the two areas that, you get the biggest return on your investment. And that even Fannie and Freddie recognize that, because in the appraisal report, they ask specifically for updates on kitchens and bathrooms. And that's because those two items are the two items that people pay most attention to when they're going through a home and they're looking for the upgrades.
Okay, awesome. So Stacy, I hope that gave you the answer there. We also have another question as, are we seeing that because of COVID-19, is the appraised value being affected in any way? Like, I guess, let me see. So they want to know, due to COVID-19 effect, how are you approaching appraised values, and do we see them coming in maybe a little lower as the market going down? That's the question they want to know.
I'm going to say this is my personal opinion and not based on any data that we've compiled. I am seeing more appraisals come in a little bit low than we were 4 or 5 months ago. And I don't think that we've got enough data to start showing that yet. But, the longer that this drags on and the less sales that occur, it's going to continue to have a bigger and bigger impact. So, really, we need to get things moving and we need to get sales occurring. Values have really flatlined because there just aren't any new sales to help increase the values. So we've got a lot of buyers who, there are people who refinanced or bought, 6 months ago, and they're trying to refinance now. They're reading a lot of data that, values have increased X amount. Well, that's not true because there's been no sales since then. So that's flatline values. And as time goes on, what we're going to see is more people, most people aren't selling right now because they don't have to. So what we're seeing is a lot of people who are selling who have to. Those become the norm, even though they're kind of distressed sales, and they'll start, dragging the market down because that's all the activity that's occurring. So in general, yeah, I have seen enough information nationally to say values are pretty flat to, again, we're starting to see some areas that are showing some signs of decline.
Okay.
That's interesting. So one of the questions that we did have, speaking of pools, was how much value does a pool really bring to our Florida market? Obviously, it's Florida. If someone was to not have a pool, but then they have went ahead and had one built in, is that, will they get their full investment back on the pool itself? And what kind of things are taken into consideration for improvement of value with a pool?
Pools rarely get their full cost back. That's an amenity that I always tell people, if you're going to put in a pool, do it for your own enjoyment, not for a return on investment. Pools we see, depending on what area of the country you're in. I know you guys are in Florida, so you see a higher return. So, a pool that costs $30,000 to put in, you may only see $10,000 back when you go to sell the property. and it goes up from there in higher priced homes. And again, what's typical for your market. If every home has a pool, yours doesn't, it's going to be worth it to put a pool in to help sell. But pools we see, in the, say $100,000 to $400,000 range, you're seeing somewhere between maybe 10 on the low end to 20, 25 on the high end. Additional value. You get up in the higher price homes, 5, 6, 700,000, you may be seeing 40 or 50. So pools are in general adding somewhere between 5 and 15% to the overall value.
That's interesting. Now, would that make a difference if you had, let's say, like you did a pool with a pool cage, as opposed to just your standard pool with no pool cage? Is it just really the bottom line is there isn't as much value in it?
Yeah, there's just not as much value, but in Florida, you do see those screen enclosures. They do add some value. Sometimes $2,000 to $5,000 above, what just an open pool would be, just because of the insects that we have down there in Florida. That is, worth it. Yeah. I own 2 houses down there. Both of them had pools, and I would not have had a pool without a screen enclosure.
Yeah. I had one open, and I had one with a screen, and I can tell you the maintenance cost on the pool without the screen was definitely a big difference.
Yep.
Okay.
And just on pools, there's some other factors that contribute to a saltwater system. Is a lot of times adds a little bit more value than a regular chlorine system, just because the ease of maintenance. You brought up the maintenance and those kind of things. The solar helps. The passive solar that you have on the roof. A lot of times will add a little bit of value because you can extend the use of the pool. Instead of 7 months, now you're getting 8 or 9 months use of the pool. So when you extend the use of it, that helps. So there's a lot of little things, especially in Florida, that contribute to pools and their value versus other parts of the country where, in Nevada, Las Vegas, you don't have the screen enclosures because you don't need them, because you don't have the same insect issues and maintenance issues as you do in Florida. So, out there, a pool's a pool, other than, the decorative around it, will add value. Whereas in Florida, things like the saltwater system, the screen enclosure, the solar heat, all of those things help contribute a little bit more to the value.
Yeah, I can see that. We did have one question from Miss Molly. She asked, how does a 3-car garage versus an extra bedroom compute out, or do they balance? I'm guessing she's asking about more towards value. So if you have a 3-car garage
Right.
and a 3-bedroom house, how does that equal out?
I'm assuming that maybe the question is directed towards, is it worth converting the garage to living area and an extra bedroom? And
well, I think she's more asking, like, if there's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a 3-car garage versus a 4-bedroom with a 2-car garage. Does that?
Okay, so yeah, and again, if you know your market and you know how many bedrooms are expected in that market, that's going to be one of the main determining factors. So if you've got a 3-bedroom home and, you've got families buying 3-bedroom homes and you've got a 4-bedroom home, that 4th bedroom may not add additional value in and of itself other than the extra living area that it provides. So let's say you've got an 1,800 square foot home that's 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Then you've got a 2,000 square foot home that's 4-bedroom. So that extra 200 square feet is the extra bedroom. Well, the only additional value you're going to get is for 200 extra square feet, not for the additional utility of an additional bedroom. So, garages in Florida are, a premium because of storage. So, a lot of times in a market where you've got, 3-bedroom homes, the garage is going to add a little bit more value than, say, a third or a fourth bedroom, other than the difference in square footage. So if you've got 2 homes that are 1,800 square feet and one's a 3, one's a 4-bedroom, you're probably not going to see a difference in value between the two based on just the bedroom count.
So the adjustment would actually fall towards the square footage, not the bedroom count.
Right.
Gotcha. And now piggybacking off that just a little bit, there's a lot of people that are doing additions to their houses. They are turning an office space into a quote unquote bedroom, and some might be listing it as such. What determines a bedroom and what determines an extra living space, office space in the appraisal world?
One of the key factors is going to be a closet. Does it have a closet? A second factor is, how is it accessed? Is it accessed off of the kitchen? You got to walk through the kitchen to get to this additional room, versus walking, down the hallway or, where the rest of the bedrooms are, things like that. So, but the key one is the closet. If it's got a closet in it, it's private, and it's, readily accessible from, one of the main living areas, it's probably going to be considered a bedroom over a, office or, additional living area like that.
Okay. We do have a question from Mr. Thomas over here. I believe it's Mr. Thomas. How does land contribute to the value, and is there a calculation or formula to determine when we do comps? So I'm assuming that we're talking about 1/4 acre versus 1/2 an acre versus 3 acres. Like, does that get determined into the value of the property itself?
Yes, absolutely. So in appraising, and we learned this way back in, our initial classes, and I think a lot of appraisers kind of forget the lesson a little bit, but the underlying land is the only constant in value. It will be there forever versus the improvements, which may or may not last, only so long. So everything is built on the initial land value. So the value of the land is what it is, and then improvements add to that value, and that's how you're supposed to determine value. So one of the interesting things that I saw when I moved from Las Vegas, where they've got limited land, and the lots are all 1,800, 2,000, 3,000 square feet, very small. And you would see, a 500 square foot difference, and you would see, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 difference for that additional 5,000 square feet. When I moved to Florida, my mindset had changed significantly. And, what I saw was a lot of change in different areas. I would go to a community that's more retirement based. And, you'd have a 10,000 square foot lot, 1/4 acre lot, let's say, versus a 1/2 acre. And the value wouldn't change much. And it confused me for a very long time until I realized that, in Florida, you've got year-round maintenance of those yards. So retirees, they don't want to have to maintain that extra land. So they're not paying extra for it. So, there's a lot of different variations in there, but rule of thumb, the bigger the lot, the more value it adds, but it's incremental. We call it the principle of diminishing returns. So you pay X amount for the very first square foot of land you've got. When you add another square foot, you're paying a little bit less for that second square foot, and so on and so on and so on as you go through, as the land gets bigger and bigger. And that's why if you've ever worked in, any kind of larger acreage. A 5-acre tract is going to bring more per acre than a 100-acre tract because of that principle of diminishing returns.
Now, when you're taking a look at the extra acreage, are you taking it for land value compared to land surrounding it, or are you just calculating it? So let's say we have a property with 5 acres, and it's got, the house is on 1 acre, you have 4 extra acres, and then you have just down the street someone who's selling just the simple 5 acres or 4 acres. Do you compare that way, or do you compare it with the property on the land, 5 acres, within a certain radius?
You're supposed to be developing the land value based on surrounding sales, if they're occurring, of vacant land. So because the land, again, is different than, the improvements, the underlying value of that land is what it is regardless. If there's improvements on it or not. The land value does not change by adding improvements. When you add improvements, you're only adding value to the land. So if you've got a 5-acre lot that's sold down the street that's, ready and developable, then that's how you should establish your land value for your improved property.
Okay. Going on to radius questions. I hear it quite often where, you have someone who says, my neighbor's house right next door valued at 250,000, but mine only 200,000. And then, maybe a builder has a house that they just built, CO'd, closed on, and it's within a 2-mile radius that they have another one that's for sale, and, the appraisal comes in short. Tell us a little bit about what your rule of thumb would be when you are searching for comparable properties. Is there
the rule
a
of
set
thumb? There's not a set rule.
Okay.
The way it's supposed to happen is you're supposed to identify what the neighborhood is, where you've got similar homes that would compete with one another. Back when the market started changing, back in rapidly going up in the early 2000s, appraisers kind of lost touch with neighborhoods and how that was going, and they would go out because values were increasing so rapidly. They were trying to find sales that kept up with that. So they would go out further and further and further to try and find a sale that, kept up with how values were increasing. And what occurred is many lenders, AMCs, they brought in this 1-mile radius to try and, if you're going outside of that, you need to explain why you're going outside of that, because appraisers were kind of throwing caution to the wind to try and keep up with the market. So the radius search kind of got established back in the early 2000s, and it's kind of kept up, over the years. Fannie and Freddie have, kind of recognized that here recently, and I don't know if you guys have heard of the collateral underwriter, the CU, but they have, it's a scoring system that they use. They gather all this data, and they provide what they call model comparables, to a lender to look at that they think are, reasonable alternatives, what should be used as comparables. And one of the key factors that we've noticed over the last, 3 or 4 years is that location is becoming, a bigger factor in the big data analysis. And, it goes back to the, principle of real estate that we've heard from, when we were little: location, location, location. So the closer proximate sales, especially in a market that's pretty stable, are better sales than, having to go out, a mile, 2 miles to find comparables. The closer proximate sales that you can use that exhibit, the most similar locational features are typically the best sales. Now that changes a little bit if you've got a rapidly declining or increasing market, because then, the date of the sale becomes more prevalent. You know, Fannie and Freddie went and they actually got rid of their, you know, time, distance, and adjustment requirements. You know, those guidelines, you know, the 1 mile radius, the 25% gross adjustments, the, you know, sale within 3 months, sale within 6 months. And they've instructed the appraisers to use the best sales, you know. And that's changed a lot in philosophy here over the last couple of years. Because again, in a stable market, you know, using a sale that is, you know, say 3 months old, but 2 miles away, does that really reflect, you know, something that sold 7 months ago that is right next door to the subject if the market isn't changing?
Right.
So location is a big factor, and the more proximate sales that you can find, you know, the better representation of really what's going on in that micro market.
Okay. Tina just joined us, and she did say that she missed a little bit of it, and she asked if we were seeing any change in values as a result of COVID. Do you just want to cover that one more time for Tina, as far as the value due to COVID?
Yeah, and we are seeing some effects, you know, based on, you know, due to COVID, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that nobody's selling right now. So, you know, at minimum, if no sales are occurring, the market can't change because there's no market data to tell us that, you know, values are going up, they're going down, you know. So we're not seeing, you know, the increases like we were, you know, 8 months ago, a year ago. Things have flatlined, and I've seen enough here recently to see that, you know, over, you know, on a national level, we are starting to see, you know, quite a few more pockets of declining values. And again, that's due to the only people that are really selling right now are people who have to. And because there's no other types of sales occurring, it's establishing a new market. And, you know, the longer this drags out and people continue not to sell their homes, unless they absolutely have to, and then what you've got are more investors that are trying to buy cheap, that starts to establish a new market.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other questions, and everybody who's on the call, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll be happy to answer all of the questions that you guys have. We've got these gentlemen here, so let's utilize this time to get those questions answered. So we have a question. One of the questions was, what was the differences in approach between FHA, VA, conventional? And I'm going to add on to that, is there a different approach in primary versus investment or second homes when determining value on that? So that might be a two-part question for you.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with VA just because the way they work is a little bit different. They go through a different process of awarding an appraisal, so I don't deal a lot with VA. As for FHA and, you know, conventional, actually determining the value doesn't change a whole lot. You're using the same principles, the same process. You know, what does change is in the inspection portion of it, what you're inspecting, what you're looking for, and what the requirements are. FHA is very much, you know, health and safety issues and preserving the property. So you're going to get, you know, inevitably more things that are subject to on an FHA. You've got some other things you have to check versus, you know, if you've got well and septic, you know, things like that where Fannie and Freddie don't have those requirements. Fannie and Freddie will also allow more cosmetic items to be overlooked, if you will. Not overlooked, you still have to disclose them, you have to take them into consideration into the value, but you don't have to be, you know, subject to, where some of those items in FHA you have to be subject to. But the main principle of valuation doesn't really change between them. you're still, they all use the same definition of market value, and determining that market value doesn't change. It's a constant between them.
Okay.
I actually have another question. This may be for Scott, since he is part of the operations side of it. So let me pull up my little question here, and this may be helpful for setting the correct expectations with realtors and home buyers. Scott, what would you what is like the correct way for an agent, if let's say that they do not agree with the determination of what the value is, what is the correct rebuttal process that they should follow so that they can approach their lender and make sure that the lender, requests that? They obviously can't reach out directly to the appraiser, but maybe they can, collect certain documentation, reach out to the lender. Well, what's the?
Yeah, so the reconsideration process that we follow, we will require comparables that the realtor might deem to be more comparable than the ones that have been utilized in the property. That's usually the first step, because that's part of the instructions that we'll send over to the appraiser for when they review that. We have a form that we actually send out to you guys that works best. You can also include on there things like factual inaccuracies in the report, such as missing rooms or other items of that nature. It's best to have all that information together, and any supporting, like MLS for comparables, if they can be provided as well. Just to get all that information together, that's typically the best way to handle that process. And Rick and his team actually deal with reviewing those before they go out. And if we do need anything else, we do typically come back to you guys. But from a realtor point of view, it's best to get those items together before they initiate that with you guys over at Coast to Coast.
Awesome. Another question, and give me 1 second. I'm going to scroll down real quick. Now, what do you recommend that we do, or what agents can do when applying pressure? So as far as, maybe pushing for certain values and things like that. What do you think about that?
Well, appraiser independence is kind of a big topic right now, and not putting pressure on appraisers. And again, this goes back to the reconsideration process. And when you're providing information for the appraiser to consider, give reasons why. We get a lot of ask the appraiser to take a look at these 3 sales, and the only reason that they were provided was their higher price than what he used, with no explanation of why they would be more representative of the subject property. So that's always in your reconsideration process to use, is that you're finding a sale and it's better than the sales you use because of X, Y, Z. It's more proximate, it's more recent, it's more similar in GLA, it's more similar in condition. I want to go back to the upgrades since we're touching on this right now. A lot of people will say, he didn't consider my upgrades. I did this, 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 and this to the home. He didn't consider these in the report. Well, the appraisal is a summary of information. It's not a comprehensive list of, the house and everything that's been done. So, we'll get that. We'll take a look, and what we'll see is that, yeah, your house has these upgrades, but the comparables that the appraiser used also have very similar upgrades. So regardless if you did them, last week or 6 months ago, really doesn't matter. It's what you're comparing it to, and how the typical buyer is going to view that.
Awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, if anyone has any other questions, we're going to wrap this up because we're almost at our hour, and we want to make sure that we can give everybody time back in their day, and I'm sure they have other meetings to attend. But I know some people may question, using an appraisal from a previous, transaction. I know, with FHA, it can be transferred. I know that us at Community Lending, we're actually able now to transfer conventional appraisals, as long as it wasn't through like a broker channel or anything like that. So can you let them know what the process is to transfer appraisals from one lender to the other?
Yeah, this is a kind of a sticky subject too, because USPAP, the appraisal guidelines actually prohibit what they call a transfer of an appraisal. There are two parties in most appraisals. You've got the actual client, and then you've got the intended users of the report. An intended user is somebody who can rely on the report, but they don't have the ownership of the relationship with the appraiser. So they can rely on the report, but they can't ask for revisions. They can't, because they don't have that client relationship with the appraiser. So when you transfer an appraiser from one lender to another, and Fannie allows this, FHA allows this, that you can rely on that appraisal. You don't need anything from the appraiser. You don't need anything. You just get the appraisal, you look at it, hey, this is okay. I can use this to make my loan. Most lenders don't want to do that. They want their name on the appraisal so that they have that relationship. So what we do, and this is where it gets kind of difficult, because we've got 50 state boards that all, take USPAP and translate it and put their own stamp on it and say, this is how we interpret it. But typically, we kind of do this behind the scenes. You want to transfer appraisal from another lender to your name, and you want your name on the report. So we, in the background, have to engage the appraiser again to, quote unquote, do a new appraisal for you with your guidelines, your information. Because when you change the name of a lender, the client on the appraisal, things change. You may require something that another lender doesn't. That's the difference in scope of work, which changes the appraisal.
Right.
So what we have to do is engage the appraiser to do a retro appraisal for you as of that date. Now, some states and some appraisers will do that. Some will not. So it gets, I can't say that every appraisal we would be able to do that for you on, but most of them we can. It's just we have to work, directly with the appraiser to engage them, do a retro appraisal. Otherwise, if you want your name on it, it would have to be updated with a new effective date and a new inspection. But typically, we can get that at a discounted rate, from there. So transfer of appraisals in the appraisal world really doesn't exist. For lenders, transfer of an appraisal is, hey, here's the appraisal. You can rely on it to make a loan if you want. But if you want any changes made to the appraisal, then we have to go through different steps to get that taken care of.
Right. And I believe that the Fannie guidelines require, if you're taking an appraisal from another, let's say, transaction that, a new house or something like that, the new buyer has to actually pay for the appraisal. So they have to pay the lender who initially had that appraisal. And then once they pay that fee, then they will release it over to that new buyer. So they still are being charged for the appraisal. I think that's what we do. So just any agents that are inquiring about that, feel free to reach out to us privately if you have any further questions. So we have two more questions and we're gonna wrap it up. What is the name of the app that you mentioned earlier in the call that we could have our clients download?
It's Value Guard Home Inspections. And typically we use that, we match the appraiser with the borrower. We send them a link to download it and a code so that so it's identifiable. And again, I'm not 100% up to speed. This is pretty new. I could get our director of IT to reach out to you with the information on it. And how it actually works, because I I was, helping building it and what information we gather, but how it actually functions, and how the information gets transferred, I'm not up to speed on that.
Okay, awesome. And then, I'm sorry, one more thing. What is the turn times that we can expect once an appraisal is inspected, once the home's inspected? What is the turn time to have that report back?
Scott, do you want to take that one?
So it can really vary by the market. Typically after the inspection, we do try to get them back within 48 hours in most situations. It's business hours, obviously. In more rural markets, it can be a little bit longer. As to total turn times, I think Ethan actually quoted somewhere around 6 business days from start to finish in like major areas at the moment. But that's kind of where we look for, is to try and get them back within 2 days of the inspection.
Okay, so it's fair to let everyone know the expectations is between 2 to 6 days.
Yeah, 6 days
Only
would
in the
be like
major
the
areas.
total time. Yeah, and two business days after the inspection is completed. So if it's delayed because of any for any reason on
Correct.
realtor's side, then it would obviously extend that due date out.
Awesome. Okay. And I think Amanda had one last question, and then we will give everybody time back in their day.
I think you just covered it.
Oh, sorry.
No, in that process, I just kind of wanted everybody to know that US Appraisals is actually really good at keeping in communication with us as the lenders with what is happening, and they're very responsive. The biggest thing is, it's also a matter of, Rick and Scott, you guys are very heavily regulated now, this day and age. A couple years ago, and I mean, back, you guys weren't so regulated, but now that you are, you have to go through certain processes, like a quality control process. In that quality control process, what are you really looking at? Is that something that you're making sure the value, are you looking at the value? Are you looking at all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, maybe they missed a word? What are you guys looking at specifically when it goes through the QC process?
Under regulatory compliance, we are only required to make sure that the appraisal meets the minimum use PAP requirements. So that's more of a clerical type of check. As for value, we do look at some key factors. What we're looking for is some methodology, making sure that looks good. We do not search for comps. We don't do any of that. We don't have the access to the data that a typical appraiser does. So we're not looking for comps. We're not looking at that. We're making sure that the appraisal at least makes some sense, and covers the basics. Our QC process is a little different than maybe some other AMCs, because we do everything from the minimum, requirements of quality control, just making sure that it's USPAP compliant, it's the right property, that X, Y, and Z matches, what was ordered, and then it goes through to the lender and they do their quality control, to a more robust, enhanced type of review, where we're getting down into the nitty-gritty methodology, adjustments making sense and are supported, and it's dependent on the relationship that we have with the lender and, what they have in place on the back end, and, differing degrees of cost based on that too. A basic review will take, maybe 4 to 6 minutes to do. An enhanced review may take, 15 to 20. So there's, definitely a cost difference there. So, if a lender doesn't have anything set up, we're doing, a more, basic review, just making sure, we do have a checklist that we use that goes some towards, some of the methodology, just making sure that it makes sense before we send it off.
Now, when you're looking at that, are you Are you running mathematical calculations on adjustments that are provided? I mean, is there a regulation on adjustments?
No, there's no regulation on adjustments. What we're looking for is just, are they bracketed? Do they make sense?
Do they make sense?
If we've got a $300,000 house, we're making $1,000 fireplace adjustment. Whether that adjustment's made or not, it's probably not going to change the value. So we're not looking too close at that. But if it's, say, a view adjustment that, the subject's got an ocean view, none of the comps do, the appraiser's making, a $300,000 adjustment across the board, we're taking a closer look at that because that's a huge part of the value with absolutely no support in the report. So we're taking, a closer look at something like that than, a small adjustment that's not going to impact the value whether they make it or not.
Okay. I could ask questions for hours, so I'm going to stop because I would have you two on the phone forever. So I'm going to stop. Is anybody else in the chat, anybody else on this call have any questions? Now's the time to ask them. Anybody? I think we're good. I think we can release Scott and Rick.
Well, I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come on and share what little knowledge I have. And, I would be open to, doing this again if you wanted to. I really enjoy, talking about things and helping people understand. There's a few topics that, I kind of wanted to discuss and we didn't get to. So, yeah, anytime, feel free, reach out. I'll be glad to make some time and do this whenever you'd like.
I think that's great. And I think that with this market and everything that's going on, we might completely take you up on that offer.
Yeah, it'll be
you can bet on that.
The Appraiser Part 2.
Yeah, I think you can bet on that actually.
Okay. And this was recorded, is that right?
It was.
Would there be a chance that I could get a copy of this? Our marketing department likes to hear what I have to talk about and then incorporate some things into, written translation. They like to hear. They like to hear what you guys ask, so that we can, get that out there for everybody.
Yeah, let me check on what our transfer fee is for that. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Of course, we're going to share it with you. And we'll send it over to Ethan, and Ethan can share it with you guys. Is that okay? Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. It was just so much information that I hope this answered a lot of questions. We still have everybody still on the call listening, so I think they're really, really interested in everything you had to say. And we will send this out to you. We thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Have a good day.